Hey everyone, I'm back, and today we're going to be talking about Dune. And this movie is directed by David Lynch and came out in 1984. And I thought this movie was unbelievably terrible. I can't think of anything that I liked about it except for a couple things. And I'm just going to get that out of the way. The things that I liked, there was like a shot in this movie that reminded me of Eraserhead when it's like going around in one of the houses in Eraserhead, or like it's like a perspective shot where it just goes from one room to the next and like really quickly. I don't know what you would call that, just like a POV, but that was the best shot in the movie. I thought it looked cool. I liked the design of the sandworms in this movie, not how it was portrayed in the movie, but like conceptually how that would look. I liked that. The movie plays on the screen. Like, I don't know. That's it. There's like nothing else that I liked, or at least I can think of right now. I don't even know where to start, so I'm just gonna probably spoil the whole movie because I cannot be satisfied unless I spoil the entire film. So I'm just gonna get this out of the way. I like the first half better than the second half because the first half is hilariously bad and I was laughing throughout, and it was so entertaining for me, and it wasn't just laughing at how bad everything was. It was like, what are you doing? Like, what on earth are you doing? And one of my favorite parts about this movie, my absolute favorite part about this movie is like, they give like narration to characters to tell you what characters are thinking inside their head as if you were reading a book, but it doesn't work in this movie because it comes across as so ridiculous. It's like, what's the difference between that and characters just thinking out loud? But the difference between those two things is that narrating it is a lot less distracting than characters just saying out loud what they're thinking. And this movie is not subtle in any way, and whenever you could say it's making you think, it's less to do with it wanting you to read into it and it just being confusing because nothing makes any sense. And all of the performances in this movie were bad. I can't think of one performance that was good, and sometimes it came across as okay, but most of the time it's really overacted or underperformed, and the characters in this movie are very weak, and I just don't care about anyone in this movie. And there are things to learn about them, sure, like for a couple of them, but that is it. Once you learn these things, they're just the most boring existences I've seen. And there's nothing to them, and our main character is just so boring because he's part of a prophecy where he's just supposed to lead everyone, and it kind of reminded me of Star Wars a bit, like the prequel trilogy where they just make it a prophecy like, oh, the chosen one. And because they did that, it was impossible for me to connect with the main character. Like, if he had things that are likable about him, that would be one thing, but they don't even give him anything to like about him, and that's one of my biggest problems, is that nothing about this movie feels as though it earns your attention. And whenever it had my attention, it was just me going like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, now I just want to talk about the world. And at points, this movie kind of reminded me of Blade Runner, like the production of everything. Not that it was great or special, it kind of looked like a B movie, like a B movie version of Blade Runner. I mean, that's what it looked like to me. And the movie opens up with like explaining how everything works, and I can barely keep track of it. And the story of the film is pretty simple, and I'll get to what I was wanting to say in just a minute, but the story is pretty simple, but they tell it in the most convoluted way. I could barely keep track of it, and as the movie went along, it was just losing me more and more, and I couldn't get invested in this story at all, no matter how hard it tried. And I can't even say if this movie was trying that hard at all, because David Lynch, he pretty much lost creative control over this movie. And I don't know much about the behind the scenes of this movie, but I'm pretty sure it was a disaster. Like one of those where it's like just trying to make a movie, but nothing seems to be working. And I believe there was a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune. And it's just talking about one of the directors who wanted to make a movie about this story, but it never happened. I think it was something like that. I could be wrong. And this definitely feels like a studio film. It does not feel like a David Lynch movie to me at all, because while I've only seen Eraserhead from David Lynch, comparing Eraserhead to this movie, there's hardly anything that feels like him. Like the writing, for one thing, it doesn't feel like a movie from him. The dialogue is terrible. And all the characters are just really flat and uninteresting, and I don't have that problem in Eraserhead. I find that movie's world, the characters, the performances, all of that is great in that movie, but here it's the exact opposite. It's almost like the antithesis of Eraserhead, where it has nothing that made a good movie work. And notice how I said a good movie and not Eraserhead work, because this movie just has no idea what it is, and it completely fails. And this movie does feel as though there were scenes that were missing, because as the second act was going on, I was just really bored, and I just couldn't care less what happened next. And as it was going along, I was thinking to myself, did I miss a scene? Because there was a romance that was going on in this movie that it felt so rushed. And in the first scene that they meet, it's like, okay, he kind of just runs into her, kind of. Or you could say it was the other way around. Either way, that was the first scene that they met. And in the next scene, they're like making out, and like they're deeply in love with each other. And I'm like, what? That's worse than any movie I've seen. Like, how lazy. Why would you do that? That could have been really interesting. Maybe they just couldn't think of a way to make it work, and they just cut it short. But it removes the emotional impact that you could have, and I would love to have more scenes of narration going over what's going on inside characters' heads, because that was hilarious, and every time that happened in the first half of the movie, it was really funny. But now we're just left with a really dull and boring second half. And going back to the thing that I wanted to talk about, like just things that are just so ridiculous. And at the beginning of the movie, it opens up with like this creature thing, and once that was introduced, my jaw was like on the floor. I was like, just trying to figure out what they were doing, because I was just I didn't know what was going on. I'm thinking, wait, so you want our main character killed for some reason, and the father keeps killing his wives because they kept having daughters or something? I'm not sure. I think that's what's going on. I also wanted to mention that the special effects in this movie were pretty bad. The practical effects were fine, but when it's computer animation, it looks really bad. It's really dated, and nothing looks good. And like one of the villains is like flying all the time, and there's a scene in this movie where he's like spinning around, and you can tell that it was shot on a blue screen and it looked terrible. I could not believe how bad this movie was. And there's like different groups of people. Like there are people with like blue eyes, like their eyes are completely blue. I thought that effect looked kind of bad. And there was even a point where our main character got like blue eyes like those people. And from memory, I don't remember the movie explaining how that happened. Is it just because he's a part of this group of people? I have no idea. The movie never tells you. Or at least from what I remember. Maybe I missed it because I was falling asleep, but all I know is that that's what happened. Okay, there's one thing in this movie that I really wanted to mention, and it's the dumbest thing ever. And so there are characters that I think are witches or something. I don't know. That's what I'm gonna call them because that's the best I've got. They're powerful. That they can do this like voice that like makes people like do things that are told to them, and the voice that they do is so ridiculous. I was laughing pretty hard whenever it came up because it was the stupidest thing. And I kind of wanted to talk about the sandworms a little bit. While I do like them conceptually, what they should look like in concept, how they're used in the movie is just really lame, and they're just like moving forward towards certain characters, like they're vacuum cleaners, and it was just kind of lame. Maybe you could argue it was the best that they could do at the time, but I don't know. I guess I'm just expecting more because of like what you can do with practical effects, especially from Eraserhead, where that movie has amazing practical effects. But this movie, it just has nothing, and I don't have anything else to say about it. It's a disaster. Nothing about it makes sense, and there's no reason to get invested in any of the characters. The performances are bad. The special effects are bad. The practical effects are fine, I guess. There's a couple of cool things conceptually, like design-wise. Like I like the worms, the sandworms, like the design and what they should be conceptually, like I've said many times already. But aside from that, there's really nothing here. And in case anyone's wondering, I haven't seen Denis Villeneuve's Dune that came out recently-ish, I guess. It came out like a few months back. I never got to see it because I knew it was being split into two parts, and I kind of wanted to watch them together as one movie, but since it's being nominated for Best Picture, I guess I have to watch it. So I guess I'll just talk about that whenever I go see that. But that's for another time. And Dune, directed by David Lynch, it's awful. Don't watch it unless you want something funny bad. Watch the first half and then just shut the movie off. Because once it stops being funny, then it's never going to get funny again. That's all I'm going to say. And with all that being said, I'm going to give David Lynch's Dune a 1 out of 10. Thank you for watching my videos as always. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to leave a like and comment down below what you thought of David Lynch's Dune. And my social media links, they will all be in the description down below, so follow me there. And last but not least, subscribe to be a part of Foley Nation, and I'll see you when I get my next review up, and that is going to be for the Lego Movie 2. So look forward to that, but until I get that up, thank you for watching and have a great day.